So welcome this morning to our latest First Intuition Think Tank Forum, looking at a subject that actually has really come to my mind in recent months through numerous conversations I've had with employers that I work with around individualisation. I certainly remember when I trained as an accountant, myself, my various fellow students, our entire cohort were pretty much treated exactly the same. I think we were all promoted on the same day every 12 months. We were on the same salaries, the same packages. You know, it's the classic sheep dip approach. It would appear that in more recent years, we perhaps need to be a bit more tailored, a bit more personalised, a bit more individualised, both in the recruitment process and then in how we deal with staff from a perspective, particularly of retention and even motivation. A couple of things that, really have highlighted this to me in recent months is we performed a student survey, actually, with several hundred of our own students, kind of getting an assessment of what was important to them, what they looked for in employers. And one of the things that really jumped out for me is there was no one or two, three things that they wanted. There were loads of things. And I think perhaps that's a reflection that some young adults do want lots and lots of different things from an employer. But I think it's also a reflection that different young adults want different things. They don't all want the same thing. That sheep dip approach that was applied to me 30 or so years ago, probably less relevant. And something else, I was chatting to an employer in Sheffield just a few months ago, and they were talking about two new managers they just promoted. So two people being first promoted into management. And actually they were saying that the terms and conditions of those two individuals were totally different. They weren't put onto a similar package. They were very, very different. So I think this idea of individualisation is certainly something I've heard coming out time and time again in conversations that I've had. So as usual, I'm trying to stick with the zeitgeist of things I'm hearing when I'm in conversations with employers. So we thought we'd have a conversation, and I've gathered a really good panel of both employers and recruiters who hopefully can give us some nice insight on why this is happening, but particularly how can we implement individualisation, whether that's within our own recruitment processes when we're actually trying to engage candidates, or then once we've actually got them on board in order to retain, motivate, and see that progression within the business. So welcome everybody, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker this morning, which is Nick. So Nick, do you want to introduce yourself and take us through your thoughts to start with?
I will indeed. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me, Gareth. I'm just going to do the process of sharing my screen first of all. Get over the technology hurdle straight away. Okay. Gareth, just give me a thumbs up. Fantastic. Excellent. Okay. Right. I now just need to move you all away from my notes, and then we're ready. So yeah, thank you, Gareth, for inviting me. This is the third think tank, First Intuition think tank I've been invited to talk on this year. But the last two were two of the most informative webinars I've been on in the last couple of years. And the report that Gareth mentioned, I've used for loads of our research and shared with lots of our clients. So I've seen that, and Chloe shared it in the chat. I encourage everybody to look at that report. It's one of the most on point and up-to-date surveys of what motivates young people in finance today. So I'd really urge everyone to have a look at that. So just the relevant points of my introduction. So I run my own recruitment business in Yorkshire and the East Midlands. I've recruited in finance for 26 years. I'm a fellow of the Recruitment Employment Confederation, where I get a lot of my data, a lot of my networking, and all of the information that I'll be using for pulling together our information from today. But today, after Gareth asked me to talk, I've spoken to, or my team and I have spoken to 12 of our inner circle of HR and talent leaders across the region to ask them their views on individualisation as well. So just pull something together that's no more than 5 minutes, but very, very general as an introduction, just to get us started. So I'll look at the few headlines in the job market, the relationship between individualisation and equality, diversity and inclusion, some areas that cannot be individualised, and then I'll finish off with 3 practical tips. So first of all, defining a word at the start of a presentation is usually easy. It's not quite as easy for this subject. And I think, if we look at some of the main sources for defining words, they don't quite have the the context for defining individualisation in a recruitment sense. So I've paraphrased two different meanings here, but first of all, if I take this from the Oxford Dictionary, from a recruitment point of view, this makes me scared a little bit. So the act of making something different to suit the needs of a particular person, that can be playing to biases and discriminations and prejudices at the start. So I don't particularly like that definition in the context of what we're talking about today. So let's have a look at the Collins definition. Marginally better, treating everyone with respect that they deserve, or tailoring our processes to suit our biases. Again, it can be taken one of two ways. So for today, I'm going to ignore the Collins and the Oxford definitions, and I'm going to use the Pratap partnership definition for recruitment, which is a plan to get the best out of everyone. So for me, this is the more context of what we're talking about for individualisation today. It's positive, it's constructive, it's aspirational, and it gives us a focus to aim towards. So just for my first slide, and I'll be very, very quick with this, I always have to start with some stats. I usually have graphs. I've skipped the graphs for today, but the data that's out there at the moment, so it's still a very challenging market for employers. It's getting a little bit easier. The number of job vacancies in the UK has dipped below 1 million, but that's still exceptionally high. The number of job seekers has grown from just under 1.3 million to just under 1.5 million, but it's still very, very tight. The other three considerations for employers at the moment that I've considered before putting together my slides are here. So the changing generations, the strong extreme views, and the AI evolution. So if I take each of these in point, within the workforce and within each interview process, it's more likely there's distinct generations between Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And we talked in previous think tanks earlier in the year in April about how different groups have different priorities and different values and different objectives. We've then got strong and extreme views. So liberalism is definitely out internationally at the moment. The centre ground is not popular. And with this comes a lack of appeal to a one-size-fits-all approach. The liberal view is not popular in politics. So this influences every aspect in life, including how candidates are looking at their own employer. AI is going to be a huge subject, and I hope that Gareth will have a think tank on this next year. AI will be the biggest change in recruitment by 2025. It will completely change the way we're all looking at our employees and our potential candidates. And the only relevance I've got from this for today is that people dislike elements of talking to chatbots and automated processes. They like tailored processes. They like individualization. It's welcomed with open arms and a warm hug. So my take on all of that is that one-size-fits-all processes for employers will miss out on talent, and marginal gains can make a huge difference. Those marginal gains can be changes in tech. There can be adaptations of the EVP, but the most simple and cost-effective one is to individualize the recruitment process. Two reasons why most people don't do it. Number one is time, and number two is the fear of compromising the EDI process. So this is a question. Within half an hour of sharing Gareth's post on LinkedIn, I was challenged by one person in my network, and I'm paraphrasing, his comment was, individualizing as a non-starter creates an open door for employment lawyers. I think that's a dangerous misconception. EDI is at the forefront of everything that our business does in our processes and what we advise our clients. And I believe that tailoring and making recruitment processes more individualized can make them fairer by making modifications to get the best out of every candidate. They can be more inclusive. We can't expect everyone to perform exactly the same in each interview and assessment format, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, different levels of social mobility scales or different generations. And diversity as well on here. I mean, every set selection process will favor one type of candidate. Individualizing the process will create a more diverse team. But there are limits to doing this, and there are certain aspects of a recruitment process that need to be standard. We need standard operating practices. We need well-considered job descriptions and person specs, set criteria for CV screening, number of stages, and the same people involved in each process. So my last slide is 3 tips on where we can individualize a process. First one can be restricted by time, so I can't imagine everyone can bring this into their graduate recruitment process, but introducing an optional informal stage before each application, asking candidates what they want to talk about is the most effective way of individualizing a process. If you have time for that, that can be really effective. Second, how many processes just invite a candidate from a second interview after a first interview? If there's an element of feedback of the top 3 evident strengths and 1 or 2 areas that have not been evident to focus on for the second interview, that can be really effective. And then last but not least, this is the most effective piece of individualization that we've worked with ourselves and our clients on over the last year, and this is tailoring the offer management process. So I've shared this on 2 of Gareth's think tanks before. This is a list of 50 things that can go into an EVP. No employer's got 50 things. Everyone should have between 20 and 30. And my advice on here is either before a second interview or before an offer, send out something to the candidates and just ask them to highlight which are the 4, 5, 6 most important things to them. And that allows you to tailor who delivers the offer, how it's delivered, and to focus on the things that are most important to them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Some really great advice there. And I love that point around, whether individualization actually does that weaken or strengthen diversity, because I'm guessing depending on how you handle it, it can go either way. But thank you very much for that, Nick. I'm now going to turn immediately to Lorraine for her thoughts. So Lorraine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, hi, morning all. So I'm Lorraine Twist, as you can see. I work at Hayes and I am the national director. I'm a member of the leadership team for finance, but I guess specifically my area of expertise is accounting firms, and I lead that business throughout the UK. So have a national view. So as Nick said, step 1, let's try to share. Let's start with sharing and see if we can get that to work. Right, okay, and then if I just move this and I can start my slideshow. Right, are we good? Perfect. Okay, so today a lot of what I'm going to talk about is both from Hayes reports, but specifically finance and fee earning positions, to give some clarity and some data around what I'm discussing, but also just lived experiences being in this market. I've worked in recruitment for many years. It used to sound good, now I just sound old. So I've worked in this field for around 23 years now, and the landscape has changed massively. Going back to what Gareth said at the beginning of this session, I'm sure Nick, this will you will sympathise with this as well. There was no individualisation, really, was there? 20 odd years ago, it was all about, this is the way we do things. You're in the office from 8 till 6, 8 till 7, and things have changed. So I think it's about that there is something in individualisation. I'm not really going to talk about salaries and individualisation of salaries. I'm happy to have a question on it, but I think it's more about individualisation from a person and their motivations. That's what I'm gonna focus on today. So why do we do it? Why do we need to have individualisation in the recruitment process? I think the first reason is that candidates expect it. Our most recent salary guide, which is going to come out in the next couple of weeks for 2024, 83% of candidates are more likely to accept a position which offers that flexibility and individualisation. At the same point, 76% of clients believe that they are going to be in competition for candidates. So many of our clients are doing this already, because in particular in fee earning roles, we know getting that special hire in, or a few extra special hires, can make a massive difference to your business and a commercial impact. And leading on to that, accounting firms remain candidate led. Now, I do agree with Nick that we may see it actually be slightly more client driven this year. It's good news for clients this year. However, it's still going to be really competitive, and as such, we need to always be creative and think of different solutions. And individualisation does help with that. And I think the reason I put a heart there, it's whether you love money, you know, and the commercial impact of it, or whether, you know, or whether you feel from a social purpose perspective, it's the right thing to do, or it could be both. You know, I think this individualisation is both the right thing to do because you will have a happier culture, but also it's commercially viable, and commercial will create a more successful business. So again, talking about that ED&I piece, individualisation, I think, helps to create equity. Now, this is a people, again, I'm not talking about salaries. So ED&I is equity, diversity and inclusion. And I think, again, when I started work, it was about equality. That was, you know, everyone's equal, you know, you've got to, you know, you come in, you work hard, you get promoted. But from an equality perspective, it was one size fits all. And we know that one size doesn't fit all. So again, from a trend perspective and where we're going from commercially, socially, economically, is that equity. That an equity is so close to individualisation. So it's looking at that individual and how we can work with them, and that therefore having strong commercial impacts. It needs to have there needs to be a business need linked to it and a commercial impact, or else it isn't viable. So to give you a couple of examples of what I've experienced over the last year with individualisation creating equity. So we've just recently put a report together on what's called the older worker, which is 50 plus. Yikes, nearly there. So anyway, and there's lots of individuals that we've managed on our database over the last year to tempt back to work with roles that we couldn't fill. And these were, in many ways, these candidates were very overqualified for the role, but they got bored of walking the dog. So we called them up and asked them to come back to work. And they're doing a job that's a 5-day job in 2 days. But for them, the equity they need is they want to work part-time, right? That individualisation. But the equity that creates then is that you get actually a more diverse workforce in regards to age. You get a lot of wisdom. You get a lot of skill. Another example I can think of is it was what was probably thought of as being a very traditional accounting firm. And there was an individual that, you know, the process went really well. And they had, due to their religious beliefs, there were certain times of year that they needed extra holidays, they needed time off, they needed to do things a bit differently. And the firm was incredibly supportive of it and genuinely give this individual the individualisation they needed. But now through that, the whole firm has been educated about this individual, you know, their religion, what they need, and they're creating communities. So there's some really good examples of how individualisation helps you to get a stronger caliber individual. It then helps you to commercially, from a recruitment perspective, access a new talent of pool of individuals that you may not have done before. Now, the next slide is interesting because I thought it would be good to think, what is the modern workforce now? What do people think the modern workforce is? So yesterday when I Googled it, this is what the modern workforce is. This was the picture that came up. And again, it links into that individualisation and therefore over time equity, different ethnicity, different ages, you know, and again, in these candidate short markets, commercially, we want to access this pool. We know we are energized by people like ourselves naturally, but we know in business, the most commercially successful businesses have that diversity of thought. So where to start? It's you know, it can seem quite overwhelming, you know, and as Nick said as well, maybe some firms can be a little bit scared as well, you know, where to start. So I think for me, it's all about that individual touch. So starting firstly with with rapport in the recruitment process. And to give you a practical example of that, it's something such as, you know, asking individuals, and you can do this for all, asking all individuals questions about themselves, not just their skill set, but not making it too personal. So, you know, questions such as, tell me what motivates you? You know, what are the 3 most important things in your new role? Where do you see your career going? Let's talk through a career plan. And if you do that in the interview process, you will naturally learn a lot more about that individual, but it's something which is parity and you can do for all. I think secondly, really sharing your culture is very important in the process. That emotional connection is important for anyone moving into a new role. And I think in the process, again, do this for all, but have that have that point in the interview process where you really share your culture, think about what makes it unique, and make it be genuine. But also equally, if you are interviewing someone and there are individuals that are like-minded in the organization or firm, make sure you make that clear and they get involved in the process at some point. Face-to-face is obviously so important in any interview process. I do agree with virtual meetings initially to get the ball rolling and create speed, but I think that face-to-face meeting and that genuine connection really helps with understanding, which naturally creates individualization. And I think the last point is creating a natural, informal situation, if you can, for key hires, where you get to know them a little bit before offer or offer to acceptance. And that could be just a quick lunch or even just a quick coffee or a drink with future colleagues. And then you're in a position where you're naturally discussing informal parts of your life with each other, and you're giving yourself to them as well and giving them some valuable information, and therefore they're more likely to accept the job, but they're also more likely to stay in the job because everyone knows exactly what they're getting into and understands the whole person. So there's my tips.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lorraine. Some great points there to add on to Nick. Thank you very much for those. And please, anyone in the audience, as our various speakers are commenting, feel free to throw your own observations, insights, experiences through the chat box. I really love getting as many different ideas as possible. And to that end, actually, to follow on from Nick and Lorraine, we've actually got some additional expert recruiters actually joining us, and I'll be interested in their thoughts. So actually, before we get some further tips on how to implement individualization, I wonder whether, we've got Catherine with us. Catherine, what sort of blockers do you think stop managers from adopting these kind of individualized approaches?
Well, I think we've covered quite a lot of them already. They're two really good presentations. But I think starting on a positive note, that wanting to have a standardized process because it seems fair, I think that probably is the main one. I mean, on a less positive note, probably just not really being mindful enough to have thought that it matters. So they're probably the two key things, just that standardization sort of being the traditional way and perhaps being the fair way. But I think, that's quite unusual now. I think people are very much sort of keeping up with the fact that things need to be far more individualized. And I think maybe there could be some technology blockers in terms of perhaps not just having the capability, but then, I'm not sure that's really should be a blocker. We've all got access to Teams. It is fairly straightforward. So really that is something that they should be able to get over if the mindfulness to do it is there.
Yeah, I suspect there's a lot of inertia involved and a lot of habit in terms of how people do things. And particularly, I always think there's a real challenge. The tighter resourcing is, the less time anyone's got to give the headspace and the capacity to these sorts of new ideas.
Yes, catch-22, isn't it?
Absolutely. Javed, is this a particular challenge for SMEs who might have more limited resources?
Yeah, I think it will be, but it shouldn't be. And I'll come to those reasons towards the end of this response. But I think the challenge with SMEs, but some of this may even be labelled within larger companies as well, but ultimately it takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of traditional processes we're talking about that have always been done a certain way, and we're now challenging the status quo. And then for that challenge needs a lot of research and understanding and education. You need to have the time and inclination to want to do it. And, time pressures, we've all got them. And whether it's in-house talent teams and HR teams or hiring managers have got their day jobs to do, so time will be a big factor. I think there's probably a lot of overwhelm within there. Like, where do you start? There's a huge amount of HR tech and recruitment tech and innovation that's gone on in the last few years. But having been through that on a personal journey in terms of setting up my own company, you will get completely down rabbit holes and overwhelm. And I think that is a feedback that I've had with some other contacts within HR and talent teams. I think a lack of knowledge and resources. I think SMEs aren't blessed with the budgets and resources that some of the bigger companies have. So I think that's where some challenges will come through. Budget, I think that's a big one. I think when you're looking at individualization around not just recruitment, but benefits packages, etc., there's almost a misconception that actually it's going to cost a lot more. But what I've known, and having spoken to a lot of SMEs, is that the HR tech around sort of benefits and individualisation is a lot more affordable and accessible and meets the eye. So a lot of my conversations when I'm not recruiting for a client is around, just giving them a steer and a sounding board around, look, these are some areas that I know that some other SMEs use, and it is not as expensive as you may think. So I think, it's almost challenging those misconceptions and going, look, these are things that are going to be different. The other thing as well is seeing the size of company as an SME as almost a benefit for individualisation. I think the bigger the company, large, hundreds, thousands of employees, if you're trying to garner employee feedback in terms of what's going to work for them, external candidate feedback in terms of attraction, that's a huge sort of pool to try and garner research and feedback from. But within SMEs, I've always said you're a lot more agile. You can get around your employee pool a lot quicker. You can get around your potential external candidate pool a lot quicker and get that understanding. So that agility will mean that you through research or polls, feedback, you'll be able to, be quicker and be a lot more agile as a result. And you've seen that in the last few years where I feel SMEs have fought back, where from a career point of view, it was always about the big 4, top 10, or within industry, the bigger corporates. But, you've got more the smaller independent firms and SMEs that are able to attract really, really good talent with great track records and potential away from these bigger companies. And that's because they've adopted certain mindsets where they are a lot more agile and flexible and adjusted their demands and needs. So I think they're probably just some of those areas that I would sort of say where there could be challenges, but within there, some misconceptions where there are opportunities as well.
Great, thanks. Now I'm going to come back to Jav and Catherine in just a second with a question around how they've seen employers use individualisation in the way they do engage with candidates in the recruitment process. But I'm going to ask that first to Mark, who's joined us.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. I think in terms of how people are engaging on that recruitment process, certainly something that I'd seen recently was a business that were still doing everything over Zoom or Teams for that whole process, so kind of a 3-stage process. And actually, one of the candidates pushed back and said, look, this is a really kind of, it's a role where I need to be in front of people, to see the best of me in that position. I need to be in front of you to show you what I can do rather than just being on a screen. And that's kind of the first time I've had a candidate push back in that way. And it was absolutely the right decision, and great respect to the business. They took that on board, understood that, and invited him in to come and do that presentation face to face, because he felt that was how he could get the best out of himself. So they let him be that individual in that process. For me, that was great thinking from a business to be able to go against what the grain was. But that was because the candidate actually asked that question as well.
Brilliant. No, I love that idea, actually. And I love that's quite a confident candidate in that case, I guess, which actually I think is very much the case. I think because it's a bit of a candidate's market, they're feeling a bit more in the driving seat, perhaps. So, as has been already talked about, perhaps we have to, let them tell us what they want from the processes. Catherine, what sort of things have you seen? So you're on mute, Catherine.
Classic. That was just for comedy, obviously. Yeah, so I think we've talked a bit about the teams as part of the interview process, but I think interesting to look at sort of the onboarding process. So there's flexibility around sort of Teams or in-person coffees, etc. Whilst you're selecting your candidate, but we're seeing far more use of video. So actually, we go to our clients' offices and video their offices, their premises, and perhaps some live job descriptions with hiring managers, and sort of bring it all to life. So you have got that sort of, especially where there's remote roles and people can't actually get to the office, it really gives them a really good flavour of it, sort of during that interview process. And then after the offer and waiting during that kind of a nervous wait for the notice period to pass, sort of sending videos through for what their first week might look like, perhaps some, videos of the team, doing typical team meetings, just to kind of bring it all to life a bit and to keep it really visual.
Fantastic. Actually, just going on a point that's been made quite recently, we've got question from Stephanie in the chat box. If one candidate does a presentation face to face, but the rest are doing it virtually, is that potentially unfair to, you know, the candidate pool? I don't know if there's any views on that from our speakers at the moment. Mark.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that one, as it was as kind of my take on that. Potentially, yes, it could be being seen as unfair. But again, I guess it was the candidate that asked to be able to do that. Now, look, I'd be really honest, the outcome of that was that person didn't get that job, but it was the fact that they gave that person the opportunity to do that. And I think that we can all do things and have different skills in different ways. And if we're just going to be very rigid on things, they could have said, right, okay, look, let's go and get everybody in face-to-face, but that just wasn't the way that they did it. I think as we continue to do more of these things, look, I think everything should be face-to-face. I agree with what everyone else has said. You can't just have it via video anymore. There are still businesses that are doing it, but I think it opens it up a lot more. So yes, it could be unfair to other candidates, but actually some people can present better over Teams than they actually maybe can in person, because they might get more nervous because they're in front of a panel of people. So actually, looking at it from an individual perspective, that person felt that he could present best in front of people. Others feel that they can do that better over video. So I think, again, individual to each person.
I mean, I guess one of the big, I talk at schools and colleges a lot about, going for interview and going for jobs. One of the things I always say is try to stand out. And I guess that candidate will have stood out because they insisted on coming in to do it face to face. I heard a story recently of a candidate who did a video covering letter for their CV, and the employer said it just really stood out. Is that therefore unfair, or is that actually what we're looking for? We're looking for the candidates that have more confidence or more creativity. Javed, have you got any thoughts, and also to add to anything to the question around what you're seeing employers do?
Yeah, I think, echoing what Mark and the others have said, I think if we've got to break the traditional norms of what a recruitment process looks like, and in order to do that, if to go into your example, Gareth, just now, that someone has been proactive enough and got the foresight to use a technology available and create a video as part of the covering letter, or someone has spoken up and said, look, actually, I feel much more confident and better delivering something in person, then we should sort of applaud that, because I feel there have been so many processes, hundreds of thousands over all these sort of years, where really good people have slipped through the net of employers because they've just had this one-track minding approach to recruitment. And, take this particular example. If I'd had to do a presentation in this current age, I would request to come in person to do it, because I'd have more confidence in my delivery. And I do other bits of training. And I've always said that I won't deliver that training online. I'd only do it in person. So, but then 10, 15 years ago, would I have had that confidence to say to the employer, say, no, I want to do it in person? I probably wouldn't. And this is where the employer-employee sort of equity has just sort of become a bit more of a level playing field in the last few years, where traditionally for decades it was what the employer says goes and how we do it and everything else. Whereas now, in a good way, employees are being a lot more vocal in terms of how it's going to work. So I think if this continues to evolve and it can cater and bring in a lot more talent and get the best out of people in a process, surely that's what we want, rather than having these competency-based interviews with 20 questions where invariably you're not getting the best out of everybody in every single scenario.
Thank you, Javed. Now, I'm interested in some nice practical top tips. So I want to move on to talk to a couple of employers next. So I'm just wondering whether Mark, Catherine and Javed, if you could put in the chat box, if you've got a top practical tip for our audience on how they can implement individualization during their recruitment process, that would be really useful. And Lorraine, Nick, if anything occurs to you, please, let's have some top practical tips. But I'd like to now talk to a couple of employers actually that I work with. So I wonder whether I can first come to Karen, if you would like to introduce yourself, Karen, and just sort of talk to us. Do you think this sort of individualization is necessary in recruitment?
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Arch. I'm the Director of People for BHP. Yeah, so we are moving to, well, it is much more individualisation. With some advice from Nick, actually, we've done a relaunch of our values, and our recruitment now is very much values-led recruitment. So we are launching them next month, but we've already started to use it in our recruitment process. So we ask the question up front of our values, which is most important to you, and then we follow that through the journey. So I would say, whatever your values are, to live and breathe them. So if fairness, time, and then you're late for interviews, you've got to live and do what you say. A bit like Ron Seals, do exactly what it says on the tin. And we found, and we've discussed this before, but we always have that first interview, and it is always on Teams. So it's interesting, the points regarding the face-to-face as the informal first interview, and we'll take a look at that. But yeah, so I think just really reflecting your values, live what you say, and we also ask for feedback. So it's really important that even the candidates who are not successful, we will ask them and establish, you know, what was their feedback through the process. And we get really great feedback. Even the people who aren't successful say, I'm really disappointed that I didn't get the role, or you're not progressing me. However, I feel like you treated me really fairly, equitable, and you tailored it to what I wanted. So absolutely.
Fantastic. And actually, just out of interest, Karen, I mean, given that sort of favourable parting you might have with an unsuccessful candidate, would you ever kind of reapproach them at some point in the future if different roles came up?
We would, if they were on the borderline, we would reapproach them. We'll always say we'll keep in touch with them. We actually find it's more for the trainees, and we will say, in fact, we've got one this year. So someone last year didn't quite hit the mark. We gave them quite a lot of feedback, told them what they needed to go and do, and we've just obviously reopened, and they've just applied again, and they've got through, and they're like, we took on board what you said. I've done this. I spent a year doing this, and we're like, yeah, we can see that, and we're progressing. So we make sure that we know the good ones to keep forward. So yeah, we'll always keep in touch, and we find certain roles, more the experienced hires, particularly in sort of our tax area, it tends to be a longer recruitment process. You tend to have to sort of court them for longer, if you like, and we approach them. So when we've got the values and they're saying the value for me is, you know, fairness, we will then communicate with them about some of the things we've done regarding fairness, and we'll say, can we keep in touch with you, and we'll talk about them, because they're thinking, actually, these people are talking my language. So that longevity for some of the roles is really important.
I love that idea, Karen. Thank you so much. Can I turn now to Jill, actually? What's your views on how important individualisation is, and do introduce yourself?
Of course, thanks, Gareth. Good morning, everybody. My name's Jill Wright, and I'm one of the directors at Kirk News Home. We're single office, based in West Yorkshire, and a team of about 60 people. So I think we're really, really lucky. Individualisation with a team of 60 people and recruiting into that team, I feel must be so much easier. Coming back to the comment that Javed made, must be so much easier than if you're trying to do it across a national organisation. So yes, we can very much individualise things. Why would we want to? Well, I think we've got evidence here that we've got people in our team whose roles weren't individualised where they were previously, and because we were able to be flexible and individualise either their hours or their facilities if they've got disability issues and things, to be able to fit around those sorts of things, I think has really worked for us. As I say, I think we are lucky because of the size of the firm. I have to echo what's just been said with BHP, really, because we do very much interview now based on culture and values. So on CVs, we can certainly check out CVs. You know, anybody could check out a CV. We don't need to ask as many questions about what's on there, but we do need to understand people's values and how they link with our own values. So as a result of COVID, some good things came from COVID, but as a result of COVID, in the COVID year when we were recruiting, we sent out a video talking about the firm and the culture and what the interview process would be like, and what our team is like, how the team is made up. Yep. That's something that we've continued with, which is really good. I think also as part of our interview process more recently, we've asked people to come back and comment on a couple of our values and give examples of where those values fit into their life and what they understand by those values. So we give them quite a lot of help towards the sort of things that are probably going to help them in interviews. The other things we try and do is try and involve other members of the team, the people who are most likely to be working with those new candidates, especially new graduates or new school leavers. We involve other current members of our team so that they get a feel as well for the culture. And we try and bring that to life a little bit by having an insight night. We may do 1 or 2 of those during this next recruitment process, but that gives the candidates an opportunity to meet different people from different parts of the team. It gets a chance for them to meet senior people in the team and other people that they'll meet through the recruitment process. They get the opportunity to meet with the colleagues of Gareth's from First Intuition, because that would be who they would be doing their training with, and also perhaps conversations with people from the institute and things. So the Insight Night is, is a really good way as well of trying to get the culture over, because as I say, I think qualifications, etc., they're just on CVs. We can easily check those out. Some of these young people haven't had as much opportunity for work experience, perhaps, if they've come through those COVID years in their sort of year 12 and year 13. So it's nice just to get to know them. That our whole recruitment process now is about getting to know that person and finding out if that person is going to be a fit for us and for our clients. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I can see some really great points coming through the chat box as well. So thanks for the contributions there, everyone. One point I saw Javed made was around sort of candidate marketing. And I've certainly seen, and we've had to do it ourselves at First Intuition, and I hear a lot of employers who they're taking their marketing for candidates as seriously, if not more seriously, than their client marketing. Perhaps a reflection that resource is probably the limiting factor. And actually, I hear of a lot of businesses that are in a position of perhaps having to turn work away because they don't have the resource. So in terms of that kind of importance of candidate marketing, any sort of observations on that, Karen or Jill?
In terms of candidate marketing, I think it's very important for us, really, especially with the younger candidates, to try and attract people relatively local to where we are. When people suggest that they can travel an hour and a half to come to work when they're a young trainee, they might do that for a few weeks, but it certainly becomes quite a challenge in the winter months and also when they're doing a lot of studying and things. So we acknowledge that we are better to try and recruit from people who are relatively locally based, whether that's because they've been to university in the Leeds area or because they've got family here or they have relocated here. So I think looking for where we get people from and finding that they've got a commitment to the area is quite important, especially when they get into their exams, and sometimes combining work life and study life is tricky, and life becomes quite hard. You want people who have got a real desire to be in Yorkshire and work with our Yorkshire-based clients, I think. So
yeah, of course, Yorkshire. It's an easy sell for Yorkshire. Yeah, I think we agree. So we spend more time, I think, on the marketing. Our marketing team have grown, and we spend more time on sort of attracting the candidates. And it's about being very targeted about what you're looking at. So we spend most of our time in HR, like as I say now with the recruitment, that we are targeting different areas of where candidates will come from. So we had like a work experience academy last year for the very first time, and we are targeting lower socio-economic areas, and we work a lot with those schools, and getting in with them is very difficult because we want to widen our talent pool and not naturally just recruit people like we've already got in. And that's been really successful, but we have to target on that. So we find, we've recently announced our promotions, and that got greater traction from all the publications than, some of like we've won a client or we've worked with this client. We've had more intel, so we get that back from marketing now. So we know where we can target. We know where we're not reaching markets, and we know where we are reaching markets. But it's interesting. given, you know, like you're talking about the challenging recruitment market at the moment, how many people do respond to that, and they're looking at the roles, they're looking at the opportunities. So we're focusing on that. We'll focus on all the good stories that we do, and we are getting more and more traction off the back of that.
Thank you, Karen. And maybe just to sort of wind up this first half of our webinar, looking at individualizations in the kind of the recruitment process, just wondering whether you've got any sort of top tips or top experiences of how you think that can be implemented during the recruitment process. Jill, I don't know if you've got...
Yeah, I mean, more recently with our September starters this time, you know, there was a huge amount of effort, especially by Amy and the team, to maintain contact between offers and starting dates. So we had them in, they came and met their teams, they met for coffee, went out for coffee with their individual teams. We also had a social night, which was like 3 weeks prior to the new starters starting. They were all invited to the social night. Unfortunately, one couldn't come because he wasn't 18 and the event was 18-year-olds. So that was a little bit awkward. But those who came along, you know, really, it felt like on day one when they joined, they already knew their teams. So that was really nice. They were forewarned of the date of Christmas celebrations and, you know, Christmas parties for those who wanted to celebrate Christmas. So it was a real big effort to try and make them feel part of the team before they officially joined the team. And I think you have to do that because we have faced situations previously where we've lost candidates between acceptance of offer and start dates. So
I do hear a lot about that kind of, I think it was the pre-start phase from offer to day one in the office, just how critical that period is and maintaining that engagement. Karen, any sort of final tips from you?
Yeah, just on that, we've actually created a SharePoint that's only available to with their personal email addresses. They're not employees yet. We've put the offer out, and then for every office, we've got 5 offices across Yorkshire and Derbyshire, kind of upset Chesterfield, and we have videos that we've actually got people to record. So we don't do it, it's not corporate. There was a couple that were a bit shaky, we've redone, but actually it shows our culture, it shows our personality, because they showed the outtakes as well, which were quite funny, so that people don't have that anxiety and they know that this is what the office looks like, this is what we've got. We have like tuck shops and the money goes to charity. They did all of that, and I think that's really important. And the feedback this time has been that they felt like they already knew it before day one came, and that's what we want. We want them to feel part of our business and what it looks like. There's no surprises. And just quickly, just on the last, the first time this time for our trainees, we actually did like we did a couple of like human bingo and in games in the office. We always invite them to our annual festival, which is an outdoor event, but there is alcohol there. We do have trainees. We did give them a different coloured lanyard, by the way, so they weren't allowed to get a drink. So they had a yellow lanyard. I'm sure a few of them were tucking them in, but I was watching the whole time. But we actually, a little bit on individualisation, there was some, you know, some trainees came to me and said they didn't feel comfortable. So we did like a tea and cake, which was much more informal in the office. There was no alcohol, and they, you know, they felt much more comfortable as they wouldn't have gone to somewhere where they served alcohol. So again, having different events that suits, you know, the variety and the differences of people that come in was really important.
I think a really interesting point coming up there from both Karen and Jill, actually around age and around alcohol, because certainly my first default for a social would be something that probably involved alcohol, but we now have members of staff who are 16 and 17, and it's just, you know, it's made me rethink actually, you know, just so we're inclusive with the kind of events that we're actually holding. So lots of axe throwing and darts and things like that. Brilliant, excellent. So a great first half to our webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. I can see actually a question Stephanie's put in the chat box around engaging with schools. Now, a bit off-piste for this webinar, but if anyone has any tips for Stephanie on engaging with schools, please feel free to put them through the chat box. But we've considered individualisation in the recruitment process, so hopefully lots of good discussion and tips coming out there. We're now going to think about, well, what about the actual existing staff you've got and trying to retain them? I was hearing what Nick said right at the start of the webinar, that I get the impression that recruitment is getting a little easier at the moment, but retention still seems to be really challenging. And we see a lot of our students moving around firms even midway through training periods, which is not what would have happened in the past. So, you know, retention, but also motivation, progression, you know, getting the best out of the staff we've actually got. So I'm going to turn back to Lorraine, if I can, for her thoughts on individualising with existing staff.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's start by sharing my screen. Here we go. And can you see it? Yep. Let me I'll just move forward to the correct slide. Here we go. So retention. So I'm probably best placed to talk about retention because obviously we have candidates come to us quite often that aren't happy. And every year we put a survey together just looking at why did they come to us? You know, what was it why did they want to leave? So I think it's important to understand why people want to leave their business or firm, and then I can talk about how individualisation can help. So I think firstly, and it always comes up, they feel undervalued. Now, that could be salary, but again, I don't want to talk about salary a lot today, but just my viewpoint on salary that was make sure that individuals are paid market rate. And I'll talk about that in feeling undervalued at a moment, but it's more, maybe if they feel they're paid under market rate, it's that feeling of not feeling like they're going to progress or they're a big part of the firm. It's the role itself. Is that their personal values are not aligned with the work culture or values, and flexibility. These are always our big four every year. It might change in order, but it rarely changes. And flexibility has been there since COVID. That's the one that's been the biggest climber. So what I'm going to do is take each point now and talk through how I believe individualisation can help with that. I'm not going to come to the next screen. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I'm there. So feeling undervalued, many candidates do come to us feeling undervalued, and it's a real shame when this happens, because usually these candidates are high achievers or individuals that are long-standing in a business or firm and very solid. And they're usually individuals actually who find it hard to say no. So they're people pleasers. So because of that, they're working very long hours. Because they've usually been with the business for a long time, this is where I'm going to just mention salary. They might be paid slightly less than new people coming in, because just that individualisation hasn't been looked at from a parity perspective for a while for them, not all, but in some cases. And how I think individualisation can massively help this group of people is they're usually actually quite loyal people that are a bit run down. And it's actually just someone really helping them, giving them that one-on-one attention, you know, helping them to manage their workload, and helping them to say no as well. So that kind of one-on-one meeting, you know, career planning, looking at what they have. These individuals as well tend to usually report to multiple stakeholders or partners, and because they're good, they get a lot of work loaded onto them and no one realizes how much they've got. So it's about taking that centralized approach and helping this group of individuals. So feeling the next point is about flexible working. As we know, that's, you know, really key, in particular post COVID. And I think a lot of firms and businesses have done really well with flexible working. And most have a policy in place actually. So, but I think that there still can be a degree of individualization where, you know, you're just reviewing individual needs. And if you have someone that's just an excellent worker and they've worked with you for a long time, but something's changed in their life, and they need that extra help and equity and a bit more flexible working, not reduction in hours, but I just think it's something that it's helpful to consider. I think also I see this a lot actually. It's questioning business needs versus culture needs. So if a person requests flexible working or changing their hours or hybrid, and actually from a business perspective, a stakeholder or a client perspective, it doesn't work, I do absolutely accept that and think that is fair enough. But sometimes it's just because it hasn't happened before in the culture. And so there it's about questioning yourself, you know, why couldn't we do it? You know, why couldn't someone come in at 10 and start at 6? Is there a real reason? I think many people and many firms have advanced beyond that, but it's something to consider. Without a doubt, autonomy as well, and people feeling they can do the job on their terms equals motivation. You know, it equals probably people working longer hours and doing a better quality of work. I think creation and an evolution of flexible working, you know, it does always increase retention. And again, that could be done through that centralized policy, but also through that individual approach. Hopefully none of us are at this point, but it could also be the role itself. So if someone is really not enjoying their role, it's usually because for a very long time they haven't had a non-operational career review, where we're all very busy, and the reason this doesn't happen is not because anyone doesn't want it to happen. It just falls off because everyone's busy with the operational day-to-day job. And again, these people are probably quite good performers that have done the job for a while. But it's about even just twice a year as a starting point, putting in place and having in the diary a non-operational career review. It's not always about promotion as well. It could be about aspiration, about where this individual wants to go. It could be a sideways move. It could be into a different business area, or it could be someone that actually they do have ambitions you don't know about, and how can we help them on that journey? And then it's about looking at that mid and long-term career plan with that individual. And also there could be then help required with, you know, with upskilling or reskilling that person. But it's much better doing that, I think, with someone who's a really established member of the team than starting from origination. And these, you know, these couple of touch points every year, or even 4 touch points a year, does make a massive difference to retention. And then it's about, you know, corporate values. We see increasingly that, you know, candidates will leave a position if they no longer feel aligned to their employer's values and purpose. In a most recent salary guide that's coming up, 82% of candidates said they would leave if they no longer felt aligned with that culture and values and social purpose. And it's quite complex, I think, because the offerings almost need to continually change in order to reflect the marketplace, you know, and social and environmental pressures. So I do think it can be quite confusing, but I think it's just taking it, basically listening to individuals and generally the people that work for you. For example, over the last year, we've seen the biggest demand in benefits to be personal and family health insurance, for example. So I think I mentioned this to Gareth before, and it's something previously we've worked together on. But when we're, you know, getting offers this year for candidates, you know, they're really, really interested in individual and also family health insurance, just due to the climate at the moment. And I think how we can individualize that is, I think, firms and businesses that do it very well, it's listening to people about that upward mentoring. Karen mentioned it a moment ago, how, you know, with trainees, they didn't, for want of a better word, they didn't want to go out in the mega lash, the 16, you know, they wanted to have a cake and a coffee. But if you don't ask someone's opinion, then they're not going to tell you, so they won't feel aligned. Also, I know that many firms, we do this at Hayes now, you know, you have a talk back survey and sessions where you ask people's opinion on what they need and what they think about the values and purpose. But if you do ask people's opinion, you know, you then have to action it also. But again, it's that individualized approach where, you know, everyone feels like they're a part of the culture and a part of the values. And if that is the case, that's an incredibly powerful retention tool. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Lorraine. And again, that kind of theme coming out, that obviously when resource is tight, which I think it is for virtually everybody, you've got less time and capacity to do the very things you need to do to improve the situation, whether it's on the recruitment, as we talked about earlier, or the retention piece that we're talking about now. And actually what you said about the individuals who find it hard to say no, that really resonated. Probably the 2 most valued colleagues I've lost in the last couple of years, it was because I didn't stop them taking on too much. Easy to blame them for taking on too much, but it was my responsibility to stop that happening. So actually that really resonated, because they're the ones you really want to keep, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're good. They're usually good. That's the thing.
Yeah, and
they're
loyal
good.
and committed, but they've pushed themselves too hard.
Yes.
And, you know, yeah, so that's something I'm very ashamed of, actually, in my own business. But
it's very common, Gareth. It's very common.
Reassuring, but still my fault. But thank you, Lorraine. Catherine, we heard from you earlier. I wonder if you might introduce yourself and give us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just do the tech bit. Bear with.
And in terms of the tech bit, actually, a lot of talk today about tech and recruitment, AI and recruitment. So I'm definitely going to be organising a forum on that in coming months.
Yeah, that's absolutely, it needs to be in the diary, doesn't it? So morning all, my name's Catherine Wallace. I'm Operations Director at the One Group. I've called this Trials and Tribulations of Modern Management because sometimes that's how it feels. I was slightly concerned that Lorraine and I might cover exactly the same kind of content, but I'm pleased to see that we've come at it from slightly different angles, which is really good. There's definitely some sort of recurring themes through here. Some of this we've covered already, and the time slots are quite short, so I'll skip over the bits we've already covered. So I've got a slightly different take in that I've kind of talking more from personal experience rather than sort of through the candidate client side of things. We're a recruitment business, so obviously we have that going on too. But I manage 50 or so staff here, and we've just seen such a change over the past, you know, I guess it's 3 or 4 years really in terms of the way that we need to manage staff. So I just wanted to share some experiences there. So in terms of what I'm going to cover, why are we even talking about this? Why is this such a hot topic at the moment? Touch on retention and motivation because that's key. There absolutely are challenges of the modern workplace and managing within it. So we'll cover some of those, and then the rewards, which are massive. So individualisation in management, why are we even talking about this? And we've covered a bit of this already in the first half, the workplace layers, and I can never remember all the different Gen X's, Z's, etc., and which category they're in, so I'll just call them layers. But you know, within, and that's not new. We've always had you know, school leavers to almost retirees within any one workplace. But these days, the stark difference between the way these people want to communicate, their attitude to work, their attitude and ability towards technology is just so different from each other that one size fits all just cannot be relevant anymore. You know, we have to take into account these different layers and kind of manage around them. The technology piece is huge. You know, different people wanting to use it, people not wanting to use it, some being very adept, some being a bit reluctant. You know, we have to sort of incorporate that, and it all has to be worked around. I think, you know, the biggest thing over the last few years is, of course, the post-COVID impact. It's changed all of us. It's changed the way we work. It's brought work into the home. It's brought home into work. I mean, you know, I've just seen a sausage dog run past the door. We've got dogs in the office. We've got all sorts going on. I'll go into that a bit more in a moment. But, you know, you need to understand, if home and work is so blended, then of course you have to understand people in far better depth and human terms than we ever needed to. And then the skill shortage, you know, we are still in a very skill short market. And of course, that means, you know, we really need to hang on to people. And that shift of control and power is really marked. And, you know, as managers, we feel it. And unfortunately, our employees know it as well. And so, you know, are they still in the driving seat, or is it a bit of a battle? But it's absolutely something that needs to be considered. So I've kind of broken this into two sections, the intangible elements of individualisation in management and the tangible elements, which is kind of what you might have called the fluffy bits, which I think is actually a very incorrect and politically incorrect term to use these days, because it's actually not fluffy. You know, it's paramount. It is probably the most powerful part. So, you know, good management is all about getting the best out of your people and not giving them your best. And I think certainly you know, I used to recruit when I was a hands-on recruiter. I was in the finance division, and we saw quite a lot people with high technical skills moving into management roles because they were good at their technical job, and therefore the next step, of course, is to manage, but they don't necessarily make the best managers. And actually being in tune with those kind of the empathy and the understanding and the sort of softer skills is really key, and it never has been more key than it is now. And actually, you know, getting the best out of your people and not giving them what you think is the best thing to do isn't new. You know, this is a management style that's always been a choice. And really, it's just coaching. But I think that probably is the most prevalent management style at the moment for a successful and happy workforce. So these are just some of the sort of softer aspects of management that I think really play into the individualisation, you know, understanding people because of that connection between home and work, you know, the sort of understanding their drivers and making sure that they're aligned with the business drivers. You know, if you're going to manage people as individuals, you know, they have to be bought into where the business is going to. Otherwise, believe me, and I felt it, you feel like you're losing control and it kind of feels like chaos is about to reign at any moment. You know, there has to be that sort of trust and respect. And I guess the trust piece starts from the employer in terms of working from home and the autonomy and the freedom and the flexibility. But that has to be soon reciprocated, you know, because it's got to work both ways. Otherwise, you know, the business can't operate. So it's really important to get that right. And we'll talk about that in the challenges in a moment. I think, you know, whatever layer you're in of the workforce these days, that recognition and value piece is really important. People want to feel valued. They want to feel that they're being seen and that they're recognized for the work they're doing, or just the value that they're creating. They don't have to be top performers or senior management. Everybody creates value at the level that they're within. And it's really important to recognize that, but not just, you know, what you did was good, but the way you did it was good. It's bringing that individual sort of contribution in that you're recognizing and valuing them as opposed to their work. And I think, you know, the clarities and boundaries piece is that, you know, when you have individualization, you can't function as a business having everybody doing things differently all the time. There has to be a common purpose and a common direction. And actually people need boundaries and they need clarity so that they can understand, you know, what's okay and what's not. So we had a situation where we had various dogs in the office at one time, and we had to sort of create some clarity and boundaries around the fact that really only one dog at a time was going to work. And actually, you know, while people were a bit disgruntled at the time, they soon organised a WhatsApp group and were organising whose dog was going to be in. And actually now it works perfectly. So moving on to the sort of more tangible things, and I won't talk through all of these because I don't have time, but, you know, the tangible aspects of retaining and motivating people now is the benefits package. And we considered a perk box style, pick your own, pick what suits you. But we felt that really lost the sense of culture and team. You know, we want people to do things together and we want to create benefits where people can celebrate successes together. So, you know, absolutely more than 25 days holiday and a pension these days. These are just, I mean, we have gone to town on our benefits package because it's so hard to keep and retain recruiters. It's very competitive. So, you know, we've put lots of things in, but we've aligned them with the softer aspects of our management style. So that, you know, we have the trust elements, which is working from anywhere, unlimited holidays. And yes, that was terrifying to implement. But a year on, we find that because we have that trust piece, you know, people are doing, you know, they're acting sensibly and they're prioritizing work, but they're also prioritizing themselves when they need to. We have a lot based around team, from nights out, afternoon treats, you know, European trips, etc. It's a sales environment, so we work hard and play hard, but also lining up the life from work balance, you know, with the dogs in the office, family events, that kind of thing, supporting mental health, breakout areas, all sorts of stuff in the kitchen. The latest is an air fryer request. Sometimes I expect to come in and find people just sort of putting a batch of muffins in the oven or bringing out a Sunday roast. You know, seem to have got to that extent, but, you know, they're happy and they're working hard and they're taking breaks, and that's important. Technology, Remarkable's laptops, Teams, automations going on behind the scenes to make their life easier. And the value and recognition piece with the long service lunches, anniversary gifts, etc., etc. The key challenge really is the team versus individual, how to keep individuals happy but also create a sense of team. And I think there's some sort of solutions around that with team projects, team purpose, clarity and boundaries around working from home, but also working in the office together and having a bit of a sort of schedule as to when that is. Sorry, just hide that. So yeah, creating, I think as managers, we have to work hard to create a sense of team. It won't just happen naturally. Where does it all end? That's the challenge. You know, you keep giving people things, it becomes their new normal, and then they want more and more. So really, it's that reciprocation. It's the striking of a deal. I'll give you this, but in return, we're aiming for this as a business. You know, how can you input into that, and constantly kind of rebalancing the autonomy and the freedom and the enjoyment that they have at work with the purpose of the business and the business goals. And finally, this is a bit of a shameless self-promotion, but you know, we've worked very hard on our management style this year and our benefits package, our culture, and as a result, really nice to get external recognition of Business of the Year and Employer of the Year. And this is our happy team who, you know, love being at work internally, but also project well externally. And I think that's down largely to our culture and, you know, the way that we manage people individually, but bring them together as a team. So yeah, good luck.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. Some great points there. I like the bit about, you know, the need to recognise individuals' contribution and work. And, you know, I don't necessarily cross paths with every colleague of mine on a regular basis, but I make an effort when I talk to my directors or my managers. I get them to tell me about their teams, who's done a great job, and in detail, so that I can drop them a quick message. Yeah. It takes me a few minutes. And the impact it then has on the individual that I've recognised a specific bit of work they've done in a specific way is well worth my time to do that, to be honest. I think that's a great point. And I like all the stuff about dogs as well. That's I think, although I guess you've got to balance the company needs as well, because in two situations in our Leeds office and our Ipswich office, actually, we've moved premises because we kept getting dogs coming into our classrooms. Which is obviously not ideal, but it's because all the other tenants in the building had their dogs in, so we've had to move to places in which there's a bit more controlled. Just want to come now to maybe Javed. You know, Javed, have you seen anything, you know, in terms of what employers are doing to treat staff on a more individual level?
Yeah, so I guess one of the ways I'm trying to going to adopt the Maslow's hierarchy of needs here about what you can do as individual, as a line manager, or as a place of work, to make sure that you are having that individualized approach. So, you know, in breaking it down and you know, and if people sort of know that theory in a bit more detail, so a person coming in and an employee to do their sort of job, there's the practical basic needs of their ability to do the job. That almost goes without saying. Then what are you giving to that sort of role within that role for the individual? You know, is there enough stretch, challenge? Is it, you know, the sort of role they're looking for? And then on the back of that, what are the sort of growth and development and learning opportunities? You know, can they see a clear path to progression, etc.? And then how does that fit into their sort of wider team sort of setup and their sort of dynamic? And do they feel like, are they actually, yes, they're an individual, but they're part of a team, and is there that shared team purpose and goals within there? I think the final part within there, and it's been touched on a couple of people, and Gareth, you'll know it's a topic very close to my heart around mental health and well-being, and the need really for line managers to not just be relying on HR traditionally when it came to mental health and well-being, and taking an individual approach as a line manager to go, right, can I get an emotional meet their emotional and mental health connection and needs, and tailoring that sort of approach to individuals and within your team. I'm a huge advocate of it, as you know, and I've seen firsthand where line managers have adopted that, have received the necessary training, because not every manager has got that. And, you know, how can you bring the best out of individuals? And it's not just the practical side, but if they can bring their whole self to work within that team, you support them around their mental health and well-being and what that means for them. They will end up producing a lot more for you, and they'll have the back. There was an example, some of you may have sort of seen it. So there was someone at Leeds Bradford Airport who worked in their finance team who'd only been in her job for 2 months, but she started really struggling with her mental health and well-being. Now, I've seen it go two ways. I've got two examples. There was one example of someone else who shared with their line manager that they were struggling, either didn't want to or didn't know how to support them. And then that person's obviously sort of left, and they've, you know, had a bad experience. And then there's an employer brand reputation there because they're going to spread the bad word. But this person at Leeds Bradford Airport did share. The line manager was supportive. The CFO was very supportive, and the employer was supportive. in return, it's not only raised the profile of Leeds Bradford Airport as a great employer. I think they got an award very recently at the Finance Leaders Award, and I know that that was one of the case study and examples that was raised as sort of almost like one of the big determining factors. So that sense of a manager, have you got their back? Do they feel connected to you? And if you have that and get that emotional connection with them and feel like they have their well-being needs as well as their practical and role needs, you've then got the perfect sort of ingredients to then allow them to thrive. And then within there's obviously other things that I'd also add finally is the focus and involvement in their non-core job areas. So you've seen a lot of emergence within firms around these subgroups around, ESG groups or well-being steering groups or other areas of sort of D&I and subgroups to ensure that representation. If they've got that connection and getting involved in other areas, it's not necessarily then just about the role and the development, of course, that's there, but these other things to get them more connected to the organisation and those sort of values for them to be more involved and part of it. If you start incorporating that with everything else that Catherine and Prior have sort of discussed around sort of culture, flexibility, work from home policies, etc., you will then again you're bringing in a perfect sort of group of sort of recipes to really then make it a success and improve that retention.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of commentary I think around what managers have to deal with and be able to manage. Back in my day, when I worked in audit managers were people who were promoted because they were good at auditing, not necessarily good at managing. And often the two didn't really go that well together. But I think there's a much clearer recognition that managers do need to manage these various issues. And a shameless plug from us, it's one of the reasons that we started developing a wide range of leadership and management programs, which we're already working with clients on. Mark, can I come to you actually, and with your hat as a manager actually, because I know you manage a team like Catherine does. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. I kind of agree with what Catherine said and Javid said as well there. I think there's a number of ways that you need to look at things these days because everybody is individual and everybody is very different in how they work, what their needs are. I've had a client recently now that puts their job adverts out where they will say that they will look at part-time, they'll look at flexible working, they will look at all varying different things to appeal to a select number of people. I think what you've really got to do as a manager and to keep that retention level, you've got to understand your staff needs. So we talked about the need at the start of an interview process to understand what someone wants, but you've got to continue that need within the business. And I think as Catherine said as well, certainly within our business, you've got, it used to be you're the top biller, right? You might become a manager. Okay, that would be the next step. Actually, the top billers, as Catherine said, you don't necessarily need to be a manager. You might not be the best manager, but if that person doesn't want to manage, I always did. So that's the route that I took. But we've now got areas where, what is the skill set that person really offers that they can do that would be differently, but they still get that progression and promotion. So for me, it's about really understanding what people are after and what they're looking for. And we do this by, we have quarterly plans, which are very individual. So we can sit down and look at training needs. We've just done a leadership program that we're working on at the moment. So we fit things around what people are after and what they're looking for. And, you've got people now, graduates that we've taken on, what they can do on things like LinkedIn and things like that with spinning adverts and things like that is, for me, it goes straight over my head. But actually the skill set that you're bringing in, everyone has got an individual skill set. So I think it's really important to work on that. There's just two other things that I wanted to kind of mention around, I guess, the retention piece. I've got a client now that is offering 3 extra days for personal development. That just go with everything else, so they can use that either maybe to accountancy qualification, use that for exams, or actually to do something that they want to do individual to them. And I think that's something really, really good to do as well. Javid talked very well around the mental health aspects of things, and mental health first aid, as I know both me and him are. That's something we've implemented as well, and it's about taking those people in those groups and giving people a skill set that they can gain that's apart from their work as well, because that keeps people interested. And I saw a very interesting article actually on LinkedIn, which was a guy, Alex Partridge, who started Lad Bible, and I think it's been doing the rounds, but if anyone hasn't seen it, he took a job after that, went into it, and it was dogs in the office, there was table tennis. He has ADHD. For him, that was overwhelming. It was too much. All he could hear was the ping pong table and the ball all the time. He left after 2 months. He'd got their Facebook following to 5,000. He went to another business, said, I want to work in the quiet canteen. I want to work from home, and please trust me. Within 6 months, he'd got their following to 8 million from zero. That was trusting an individual to deliver on what his needs were to be his best self. So for me, that massively important. And the other final piece that just to mention was engagement surveys. As you know, we run Best Employers Eastern Region, and we've all talked about what we can do and what we can do. What we really need to understand as businesses is, what do people want? How are they feeling? How do we feed back? And I think it was mentioned by Lorraine around this earlier as well. I think it's a really important key thing. Understand individuals' strengths. So you can do things like strength finders, which we've used here in our business, which has been really great. So understand and then feedback would be the key things that I would say.
Thank you, Mark. And actually, that point around trust, I think, is really important. And I think it's probably something that 2020 maybe showed a lot of managers. I think prior to that, I know a lot of firms where the partners would not have trusted staff to be at home. They wanted them in the office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. The pandemic hits, everyone's at home, and productivity didn't suffer. And in fact, in some cases, output probably got better because the trust was actually a positive for a lot of individuals. So perhaps, a lot of this changes, as with a lot of things, being driven by the pandemic. Well, we're getting towards the end of the seminar, so I'm going to now come back to our kind of couple of employers on the panel, actually. So Karen, can you give us any examples of how you've implemented, you were talking about recruitment earlier in the session, what about in terms of this retention motivation piece?
Yeah, if I use one of the examples, so for the trainees, I only recently joined sort of last year, is we're trying to showcase what a typical journey will look like, but with the recognition that unfortunately we don't live typical lives. So for the first time, for example, we'll sort of say, if you come in here and you come as a non-graduate and you go through your progress, we expect to see, changes at year 2, change at year 3, but we caveat that and say, but life isn't as simple as that. You'll have ups and downs. We've had, unfortunately, parents, losing parents, somebody with a diagnosed with dyslexia that we've helped them through. So we then talk to, like, for example, our trainees, and we're going to have our first conference. And really, we're bringing out the trainees who've been successful, but had that challenging journey, because nobody remembers the A-star student. Nobody remembers, they're just like, yeah, whatever. That wasn't me either. Our own managing partner, Lisa, she had quite a difficult time. She lost a parent quite young, and she talks about her journey and how it sent her off, and she didn't go straight down the line. It was a little bit of a curve. That's what people need to see, and actually we will support you through those individual journeys, so you can showcase what it would look if everything's perfect in the world. This is what your journey will look like, but we recognize it will not be like that. There'll be some failings, there'll be some exam failings, there'll be some life experiences that you weren't expecting, and we will help you. And then we showcase with the people that we have supported to go and show everybody, this is my journey. And it's not just one person. There's lots of different people who go and talk to the tables of our trainees and say, this is what happened to me. This is how we went through it. This is how I got through it. This is how BHP supported me through that journey. And I think that's just going to become more and more important as life becomes much more stressful. I think, just going forward, you talked about the well-being. We don't run the well-being. The well-being is run by our employees. We have 4 pillars of well-being, and I was actually oversubscribed when I said it's you that sets the agenda, not me. And you need to individualize what your experiences. You talk about them, and then you take responsibility for each of the pillars. And we've had so much more engagement off the back of that, because it's coming from the employees. It's not coming from me sat in a room trying to work out, what are the different sort of well-being pillars. So yeah, and the other final one is when you talk about taking people on the journey, we're very much about, for the first time, sharing the business plan. We've just gone through our staff conference, and actually I need everyone, you know, from the receptionist up to the managing partner, to understand what is their individual role in BHP becoming successful. And that comes out through the appraisals, which we do quarterly, and we're setting the goals, we explain people how to do it, but for the first time everybody needs to know they are part of success. You know, it's the old famous quote about, you know, the man on the moon and NASA and the cleaner, what's your job here? I put man on the moon. That's exactly what we're trying to do as well, and show how their individual contribution contributes to the BHP success.
Thank you, Karen. I love your point as well around sort of relatable role models. I was at a conference recently, and there's a lot of talk about what they call zigzag careers, because let's be honest, not many of us have had that kind of nice linear progression and success. And one of the managing partners of the firm I deal with, actually, he failed some of the exams for one accountancy qualification, ended up having to swap to another before he could progress, and he loves telling his trainees about that. Jill, can you give us some points as we finish off today?
Yeah, okay. So we've done a team survey, staff survey, trainee survey all recently. So, and shared the results of that with the team. Obviously, lots of people are doing that. That's been really good. Some very quick, easy wins that we've been able to introduce there. So for trainees, especially those coming straight from school, you know, suddenly coming into a work environment, suddenly being trainees, suddenly being apprentices, it's quite a lot to take on. So we now allocate time for each of our trainees to have a certain amount of time every month where they can get on top of their training files and things, because we realised, as much as we'd like to think they just go home every night and maybe update that on a daily basis or something, doesn't happen. So we give them a little bit of extra time, because some of them were getting a bit stressed about that. We used to give them obviously always the time off for their exam, but now we give them the whole day off for their exam, because in fairness, prior to an exam, if they've got an exam in the afternoon, they're probably not going to be up to much in the morning. And if they've got an exam in the afternoon, well, it's nice to have an early finish when you've got an exam. So that's been quite a nice change to make, really. But there's plenty of other things that we can address following the surveys. We've had for a long time now, since I did a leadership program back in 2015. We've spent a lot of time looking at our values, but I don't think we probably share those values enough with new people when they join. So we're making much more effort on that, and we're also trying to involve the newer members of the team in checking those values. Are they still the right values, and what do those values mean to people? So we've got a project on at the moment to make sure that everybody understands what the values mean. As a result of that, we also have what we call 2 Inspire posts. Inspire, the initial letters of Inspire relate to our values, and we encourage everybody to make posts into 2 Inspire when they see people demonstrating those values. People who have demonstrated those values are copied in, their line managers are copied in as well, and on a quarterly basis we celebrate some examples of those. So just trying to make sure that everybody thinks about the good stuff that's happening, you know, rather than if there's a little moan going around the office or something, you know, we don't want that to take centre stage. We want the good stuff to take centre stage. We also have something called 2 Suggestions. 2 Suggestions is anybody can just post into that inbox. It can be from a tiny little bit about why don't we do this on the last Friday of every month, to can we have different chairs because a few people have got backache, to this, that and the other. So anybody can post in there. We read them all and we feedback on them all. We action some of them, or we explain why we are not able to action some of them. And other things that have just gone down really well, charity events, you know, getting different people from different parts of the business together to go and work together to help on a charity event. We did some woodland clearing recently over at Temple Newsham. That was hard work actually, but it was great fun, and you know, quite a different group of people to the ones you normally sat with. We're working together on that, so it's great fun, and we could compare insect bites at the end of the day as well, so we all had something in common.
I guess great for physical and mental health doing that sort of activity as well. Well, thank you very much for running this off there, Jill. Thank you to all my speakers this morning, to Nick, to Lorraine, to Catherine, to Javid, to Mark, to Karen, to Jill. Fantastic range of points coming out there. I did have a private message asking me why I've got a giant wagon wheel behind me. We just don't have time to get into that though. So thank you everyone for your time this morning. Great discussion, and I hope to see you at the next FITT Forum, where we're going to be looking at apprenticeships. Certainly massive aspect of the accountancy training business now. So I hope to see you in a few weeks for that one. But enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you very much.